Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We are about to start our last activity of the day. This is a very nice and interesting activity as it will address a new topic. A topic which has not been addressed here throughout the day yet. If we consider these two topics, web as a software platform and gamers as a trend, a way where you create interaction, you can tell and share stories. And this is a concept which is now part of human beings' daily activities. And for that, we have the pleasure to have Andrzej Mazur, who will talk a little bit about the past, present, and the future of HTML5 game development. Andrzej, he is HTML5 game developer. He's a creator of the JS competition by the Game JS committee, and he writes for the publication in this area. He works with state-of-art technology, progressive web access. He likes eating sushi and he likes playing in the Noroshima X.
Hello, thanks for coming and staying till the last session. I know you might be pretty tired, so the last session will be about the fun of making games. We had some really important topics discussed today, so this last one will be just a pure joy of building games. I'm going to talk about the evolution that happened over the past few years and a little bit about the future. So I can skip this slide basically because I was already introduced. I will just mention that the Enclave Games studio is a pretty huge one because it consists of me as a programmer and my wife as a graphic designer, and that's it. We kind of try to consider our 3.5 years daughter as a tester, but it kind of don't work yet. But she's there, she's coming. She will probably be the third person in Enclave Games. So I'm going to compare 2011 with 2019. And why 2011 specifically? There was a workshop, the W3C workshop held in Warsaw during the On Game Start conference, a conference about HTML5 games, where the future of HTML5 game development was discussed. And we had a similar workshop, the W3C one, organized in Microsoft's HQ in Redmond a few months ago this year. So that's a good opportunity to compare the landscape of building HTML5 games between 2011 and 2019. 2011 is also an important year because it's the year when I started building HTML5 games and treat them more seriously. I did some experiments a few years back, but it was mostly like a snake in jQuery in 2009, so that wasn't too important. Those games were quite specific because I was just a junior front-end developer. I wanted to attend some front-end conferences. And while the tickets were pretty expensive, I decided that if I create a game promoting the conference, they will give me a ticket for free, which happened. So I attended a bunch of front-end conferences in Poland, which was really cool. There was a conference in 2012 where I talked about the HTML5 in general and whether it is ready for gaming or not. And so basically you could create games, but it was pretty challenging. The performance was terrible, especially if you were comparing HTML5 games to the native games. It was just terrible. You couldn't play anything reasonably fast. Most of the games in 2011 basically didn't have any audio because it was too problematic to have something working. Yeah, while I try to restart that, I can keep talking. So basically, we had issues with performance, we had issues with audio, we had all those kinds of issues that made our life really miserable when we were game developers. And so you were able to build something that you could call game in 2011, but it was pretty buggy and the experience was really terrible. Even if you test those things 1,000 times, there will always be something that won't work. So it just happens. I mean, I usually don't show any demos during the presentations because up until now I had 100% of demos not working. So I tried with the easy option, showing the slides, but apparently sometimes they just crash. And this is also not working. So I talked about poor canvas performance, problems with audio. So basically, when you were building games with an attempt of having audio, you had to have audio sprites because you couldn't play two sounds at the same time. So the best option was to just drop the audio and have the games without the audio. The games, we tried to have them working offline, but it didn't work. We had various technologies that tried to do that, but they didn't work. And the APIs that you could use to build games, like gamepad or pointer lock or full screen, were basically really experimental. So even if you had them working in a specific version of a browser, with the next update, the demo usually crashed. And the development tools for game developers were basically just borrowed from front-end. We were using the same tools front-end developers were using. And there was no monetization. If you wanted to monetize web content, you usually had to package it and publish in native stores, which didn't work either because there were just too many native developers publishing on those stores. There are good news. It kind of works today. It kind of works in 2019. All those things we had problems with a few years ago are working pretty nicely. The performance of the browser is good enough in terms that you can have 3D content rendered in easily 60 frames a second, even if it's like a heavy, resource-heavy content. So that's really cool. We have audio working. We can play sounds. And the cool thing is we can also generate sounds or compose songs right within the browser. So that goes pretty far from the fact that we couldn't play two sounds at the same time. And we can have the games work offline because there is the service worker in the progressive web app approach, which will help us serve the data if the connection is not there. The support of the web APIs is really good. Gamepad API have like 92% of the support in the browsers. So you could easily have web-based slides and control them with Gamepad, which is Xbox 360, which uses the Gamepad API. So basically, that's the beauty of the web being controlled by the web API. There are many tools we currently have. It's not like we have to write the code from scratch. We have editors for creating 2D content. We have editors for creating 3D content, which works pretty nice and really nice and really fast. So this helps us create even more complicated games and experiences in a short amount of time. There are so many cool games that I wanted to show you just 3 of them, which are even more impressive if you consider that those 3 games, every single game was created for the JS13K Games competition, which is about creating a game in 13 kilobytes zipped. So it's a zipped package with 13 kilobytes of assets. A few years ago, it was really hard to create anything that was working. And right now, people create those amazing games, and you can't even tell that they are limited by the size. So we can say that the technology is sufficient. We can create rich, interactive things on the web, really cool games. But there are still issues we have, which are, I don't know if you remember the fight between the web and native, and trying to choose one over the other. The current landscape for HTML5 games is basically a lot of publishers, a lot of portals, which starts pretty quick. There are many of them, so you have to be quick and publish on those markets, on those platforms, as soon as they are appearing, because there are so many developers creating so many games that within a few months, the whole platform is full of games, and it's really hard to stand out with your own games. If you choose native, obviously you have to compete with native, you have to compete with native developers, play by the rules. They know native better than web developers, and we as web developers have the extra layer of an application that packages our game and puts it on the store. So that's another level of making your life harder. The different thing that is starting to happen in the previous few years is that since we can build so many different experiences, we have the split between indie developers, which are studios of 2 or 3 or single developers working on games, versus bigger studios. So we have those small indies creating hyper-casual experiences which you can play on mobile, 30 seconds, stay in traffic or something like that. And that is compared to bigger studios which try to explore technologies like WebGPU, which is a way of accessing the graphics cards from within the browser, or WebAssembly, which is a specific subset of specific language in which we can have really fast calculations, which can help calculate different things in games. And those studios usually have like a huge amount of assets they want to load. So we are comparing a 3 megabyte game with like 300 megabyte game. So I was wondering about the current situation and wanted to ask mostly indie developers, because that's where I'm pretty active. What are their struggles? What are their needs? What problems do they have? And compare that with my own experiences. And I had a huge list of things, which goes through things like we have too many packagers and preprocessors. Back in the days, you could just view source the website and learn from the source code. And right now, it's just packaged, compressed, compiled, and you can't even find anything in it. We need more developer tools focusing on game development so we can actually test and debug the game in the browser. More tutorials, courses, materials. We have a lot of materials, but there's always room for more. The thing I mentioned that the platforms are oversaturating pretty quick, so you have to act quick. You have like a window of few months time when the new platform appears to actually try and push your games to make any revenue, because after a few months, the gold rush will be over, and you will have to look for a different publisher. And since the first few months of a platform is important for the platform owners. They invite indie developers to show that they have games. And then after a few months, they start to talk with the bigger publishers and don't care about indie developers too much, because instead of like dealing with 400 developers, they can talk with one company and get the exact same amount of games. Some people mentioned that it would be nice to have math modules built into the browsers. Some mentioned shared array buffers as a way to have multi-threaded games. But the two most important things that were mentioned in the survey that kind of relates with my own experiences is that right now it's really hard to be discovered. And thing that is connected with that, it's really hard to earn money on the web. So let's discuss discoverability and monetization. So discoverability, a few years ago in 2011, you could create a game, publish it on the web, and basically that's it. There were not that many games, so you could end up on 30 best HTML5 games to kill your boredom, or 40 addictive web games powered by HTML5, because basically there were 40 games total worldwide. So there were like dozens of articles like this, and everybody more or less knew each other, and it was just release a game and wait, and after a few months, you were a super popular games developer. Right now, it's really hard in terms of having so many developers building so many games, because right now, building those hyper-casual games is super simple. You can create those in like a few days. So you could see posts like those that someone, I have absolutely no idea who, created 500 games. That's insane. I mean, a few years ago, a huge portal with the games, buying games from like various indie developers, would have 100 games. And there's a single developer that created 500 of them. And there are hundreds, or if not thousands, of developers like these today that are building those games. So it's extremely difficult to get noticed, be featured, earn money. Earn money. So the monetization part. A few years ago, main focus on dealing with publishers was selling licenses. We as developers were selling a license to a publisher for a fixed fee, and then the publisher could publish the game on their portal and earn money. This kind of changed in the meantime to subscriptions, so we were paid some smaller amounts of money every month. And unfortunately, this changed in the past 2 or 3 years to the advert revenue share model, in which we have to deal with the publisher, add some weird, usually not working piece of code which will show adverts in our own games, waste 20 or 30 hours on that, then submit the game to a publisher, and then wait half a year to see if it even works. We also have to deal with issues of our code being stolen. One thing was trying to protect the assets, which was more into making unscrambling the code harder, not impossible. But the problem recently is that since the games are easy to build, instead of trying to steal the source code, you can just clone the game. And you can see that from if there is a huge mobile hit, a game first place in iOS or something like that, you can see the clones flooding all the markets within just a few days. So instead of like trying to protect the code, you're doomed anyway because it will be cloned. Even though we have those issues, I think the future is still bright in terms of the technology, in terms of fighting with discoverability issues and trying to monetize the content. From the technology point of view, as I mentioned, it works compared to 2011, but there are things we can do better, we can improve, we can have them working faster and better. Like PWAs, progressive web apps. You can build websites which will work better and faster than the native applications. We had this case of an PWA application, which was basically a website for the Neuroshima Hex board game. It was a helper application, and it was priced over the native applications created by the publishers of the game itself, because they had only the iOS and Android versions, while this worked on basically anything with a screen. So we were laughing that even if your fridge have a screen, you can launch this on your fridge, which was really cool. So I can totally say that we will see the death of progressive web apps in the next few years. So like, wait, what? And I'm going to keep you hanging on this. The death of PWAs. Do you know the term, the RWD, what it stands for? Any ideas? So that's responsive web design, a way of building websites, which was coined, the term was coined a few years ago, and it was a way of building websites in a way that they looks different on different devices, but they work on all of those devices. So for example, when you are building a website in a responsive web design way, it worked on a smartphone, on a tablet, on a laptop, PC, fridge, or whatever. It just looked different. And it got used by so many developers. It was considered a way of building websites, which was the one and truly way of doing that. So right now we are building websites with a responsive web design in mind, but we don't even know that it was called that way. So I can safely say that we will be building websites in the next few years, which will have PWA's features, and we won't even call that PWAs because it will be just building websites. There are different technologies we can use already to build some experiences, like WebXR, which is virtual reality in the browser. There is a game called Moonrider, which is basically a Beat Saber clone. Do you know the game Beat Saber? Any hands? Anyone? Okay, cool. So Beat Saber is a game for which I basically bought Oculus Quest because Oculus Go didn't have the controllers. So if we can create something similar with the web, and I've tested it and it works, I think that's really impressive. And we can go from that. We can create even more interesting experiences, which will be either the same as the native ones, or even better. Other technologies we can look into is, for example, WebAssembly. There was an entry in the JS13K Games competition last year, which already used WebAssembly to simulate fluids. So you were like having your small ship, and you have to land on a platform, but there is a wind or like water or whatever flowing, and you have to adjust your movements. And it was really nice to see that, in theory, you would have like megabytes of code to have WebAssembly properly processed, but somebody figured out how to do that in less than 13 kilobytes, and it worked. So that was really impressive, I think. There are things like WebGPU, which will help speed up things, and we don't need to build the next, I don't know, Doom or Quake or whatever. We can use WebGPU for calculations in the hyper-casual games or basically any experiences we want to build. And there is a saying that everything is a remix, so I think it's quite important to try and mix and match all those technologies, and I think that will be the future, that we will be able to combine a few different technologies into one experience. There is a game called Hungry Fridge, which we created in Enclave Games a few years ago, which kind of uses that idea, because you can play the game on mobile and you just tap on the food to collect it. But if you connect a gamepad to a laptop, then it turns into a crazy game where you shoot with a tank to the food in those nice pink colors and everything. But it works. So I can imagine someone trying to build a 2D casual game which will work on mobile, and then we can add progressive. Oh, not again. Seriously? Yeah, seriously. So I can imagine a game that you would build which will be 2D. It would work offline with progressive web apps using a service worker, and then adding all the other technologies to the mix. So it could, one thing would be working the game offline, but you could also speed it up with WebGPU. You could make it faster with WebAssembly. It would be nice if you could take the exact same game, put it on the VR headset, and have a VR game which would have either a full 360 view or like 2D game, but with 3D effects running around the original concept. And in the worst case scenario, if your laptop would be crappy and would die in the middle of the presentation or something like that, I don't know if you know the concept of streaming from the cloud. There are a few projects trying to accomplish the concept of, instead of playing games that are really hard to play because your device is too crappy, you could have the game streamed from the high-end PC to your crappy laptop. So you could basically, if there are like requirements, technical requirements for your game, for a specific game you would like to try, and your laptop is like 7 years old or something like that, you can still play the game, because instead of having them launched on your device, you would have the game launched on a laptop or computer or whatever in the cloud, and then it would be about having a really good connection, which basically is a problem, but it's just a different type of problem. And then stream those frames directly to your computer, so you'd high-end game on a crappy device. That's what I said. So let's talk about the discoverability a bit. There is something called schema.org, which is a way of describing things on the web. And since there was this workshop in Redmond a few months ago, we had the discoverability discussed, and apparently it would be nice to have games described in a way that we can add something to schema.org specifically for games. So we could have a genre of a specific game ways the game is monetized, the resolution or whatever. And then all those informations could be used. So we could, for example, if we have a search engine where we are looking for videos, we could look for games, and then those games could be showed with the author, the date it was released, maybe with some images or even GIFs or short videos showing the gameplay. So we can actually look through the games and find the games we wanted to play. Another different topic which, interestingly enough, was also discussed at the W3C workshop in Redmond was monetization. There is a concept called Web Monetization API, which is a proposal for the Open Web standard. And funnily enough, I gave a talk that, it was a short lightning talk that we have issues with discoverability and monetization. And after a few months, the discoverability part was being taken care of, and we have the extension, we will have, I hope we will have, the extension to the schema.org. The monetization issues were kind of answered immediately. I kind of experimented with the Web Monetization API within my own games. It's interesting that since it's not even a draft, the Web Monetization API is not even a draft yet, it's not even a proposal, it's just a proposition to have this as a proposal to have a working draft. You can actually have this working in the browser right now. There is a Puma browser which already implements that. There is a Coil service where you can subscribe. There are different wallets you can have your money wired, etc., etc. So Web Monetization API is like brand new. It has a few months, and it already works. So we had a Web Monetization category in the JS13K Games competition. And we ended up with 48 web monetized games out of 245 submitted this year, which was a pretty nice score. Okay, so that sounds cool, but how does it work? So if you register on the Coil website, and the Coil is the first company to offer that, but since this is an open standard, so any company can compete with them. So if you register on a Coil website, pay $5 a month, you are becoming a paying subscriber. So then, if you visit the website, for example, my game, and the website will tell the inform the browser that the website is monetized. And to do that, we only have one line of HTML. So it's basically a specific meta tag called monetization, which points at a payment pointer, which I'm going to explain in a minute. So if you visit the website is monetized. Coil is paying money instantly to my account in real time. So basically, for every second spent on my website, if you're a paying subscriber, I'm getting paid to my own wallet. And I have like full control what I do with that money. So payment pointer is basically an information on where you can find or where you can point to a specific wallet. There are already few different companies offering wallets that work on the Interledger protocol, which is the base of the Web Monetization API. So you can already be paid in XRP, which are Ripple, which is a cryptocurrency, but Stronghold, for example, is a wallet offering payments in United States dollars. And I can imagine more wallets coming with support for any possible currency, because why not? And this works like so the Coil subscription works like a gym membership. So basically, you pay those $5 a month, and you're done. You have access to all the web content there is. So basically, if you spend like a week on playing the game, I will probably be paid like $20, but it's not taken from your $5. It's just $5 you pay to have the access. So you don't have to worry about anything. So from the developer point of view, I can detect if you're a paying subscriber. I can do that with checking the document monetization object and then seeing if the state have a status of started and then do something. So it's a if check. I can also do that with the event. So it's just document monetization and checking for the event called monetization start and then launching a function that does something. And by something, I mean offering some extra content to the subscriber visiting my game. So for example, I can add some coins, I can unlock a level, I can give some extra weapons, bonuses, whatever. The cool thing is, it's all about expanding my own game, my own website, my own content. So I don't have to work with publisher, don't have to implement some crappy code that I have absolutely no idea how it works. I can just detect if someone is a paying subscriber and give him something extra from within my own game. And I think that will be quite important for today, listening all the talks about privacy issues, tracking, etc. The cool thing is I can totally throw away the whole concept of earning money out of adverts. I can take the adverts, throw them away, don't worry about privacy issues, don't worry about third parties spying on my players, about selling their data, about all that crap. I can throw that away, show the users the payment pointer, basically to the browser, and have a direct relationship with someone who would like to pay for visiting my content. So yeah, go web or go home, because it's the web monetization API. It's an open standard. So instead of packaging stuff and trying to fight with closed ecosystems, closed markets, private companies selling data, I can just show them the middle finger and say that I would prefer to monetize on my terms. So comparing to the classic publisher, what I mentioned was that instead of trying to implement some weird things, and by weird things I mean the code, even the developers that wrote them don't understand it, and I have to understand that, and I have to deal with like a few different publishers, and every publisher have like a different piece of code that didn't work anyway. And instead of that, if I can just have one line of HTML, 2 lines of JavaScript, and then do something within my own game, I would definitely choose that. And with publishers, if you implement that, you have to wait for reports, usually 6 months. And after 6 months, you learn that you put 30 hours of work to earn a total of $1 for all your games, basically. So I would prefer to get paid in real time, directly, and forget about all that crap. There was a Mozilla festival a few days ago in London where we were showing all that. We were showing both monetized Enclave Games and monetized entries from the JS13K Games competition. And interestingly enough, we also were discussing something called Grant for the Web, which might interest you. So it's basically a grant started by Coil and supported by Mozilla and Creative Commons that started like a few weeks ago, in which the grant for the web itself offer grants which are worth $100 million that will be given away in the span of 5 years to all the content creators. And you don't have to build games for that. You can, if you create any type of content on the web, or you would like to create any type of content on the web, you can try to apply for the grant, and you will be paid to try web monetization. So you could try and see if this is a viable option to earn money on the web. And if you do, and this will apparently work, you will also earn the money from the web monetization API itself also. So to summarize, it seems like the technology is sufficient. We can build web experiences. We can create really cool games. But we can also try to improve that. We can try to move things forward. We can try to mix different technologies and see what happens. We have some discoverability problems, but with the right tools, with indexing, searchable games, we can overcome that. And having all those monetization issues, the web monetization API, at least for me, sounds like a total win. And I told the Grant for the Web guys that I didn't want to implement ads in my games in the so many years because I was unconsciously waiting for the web monetization API to appear. So instead of like serving adverts to the players, I could just, say that just register for $5 a month and you will have plenty of cool things and you will have access to all the other content creators, which sounds really cool. So if you're building games, if you're building websites, if you're building any type of experiences, I encourage you to try the new technology, see how the discoverability thing works, maybe try to improve that. Definitely try the web monetization API and build the future of the web. Thank you. I think we can try doing the Q&A.
Nós temos tempo para algumas perguntas. Se alguém quiser fazer uma pergunta.
If anybody wants to ask any questions, we have the same scheme we did throughout the day. You use the mics and ask a question. So I wanted to start by commenting a little about everything you said. I think it is really wonderful for us to revolutionize the scenario of game development and think that the website developer, the guy who used to develop websites, HTML, now work with PWA and can develop games, and think about developing not only for the fun of it, but also to monetize and turn that into a business, even if you do it gradually, and perhaps it will be like the Angry Birds or a game development company that did that. So I wanted to hear from you what you would recommend for those who come from the website market. You've already talked a little bit about monetization. You have talked about some other schemes, but I wanted you to tell us what you recommend for those who are used to working with app development, website development, or even smartphone apps, on how they could start focusing on games using HTML5 as a platform.
So, can you repeat the question, please?
Resumindo,
To summarize, for those who are developing games, websites, and apps using HTML5, what do you recommend for them to start focusing on game development, taking into account the good practices you have introduced us?
Are they translating to
Yes,
English? Yeah?
they are translating. So you want me to recommend a way to start with web monetization or like development of
Both.
games in general? There are many tutorials and like materials on the web where you can start building games. I think if you're a programmer, the most popular framework is Phaser, I think. But if you're not a programmer, there are different tools you can use, like Construct or Game Maker, which will allow you to build games without coding a single line of JavaScript. So you can totally try that. And on the web monetization part, I mean, if you have a website, if you have a blog, if you have a YouTube channel or any type of web content, you can already try monetizing it with web monetization, and it's just about adding the meta tag and detecting the subscribers, and then just working with your content. You can write a tutorial on your blog and have a specific section that will be visible only to the subscribers and offer them some, I don't know, extra information about the tutorial.
E sobre
What about the platforms that exist for game development, such as Unreal, Unity? Are they prepared to receive these discoverability concepts and monetization concepts?
So you're asking about Patreon or like tools like Unity?
Yeah, tools like Unity, if they are ready to use this technology.
Sure. So that's quite new technology. I would say like the web monetization API is just a proposal. The grant started a few weeks ago, so it's really super fresh, I would say. If Unity would like to try that, they are happy. I mean, they just can. They are not limited by anything. Since they have export to the web, they could technically do that. I mean, even a developer could do that without the help from the Unity authors. You can try web monetization no matter what tools you are using. It's independent from the tooling. It's about if you have any type of web content, you can basically try to monetize it right away, I would say.
Uma pergunta ali.
So we have a question from the audience. Good afternoon. Congratulations for your lecture. My name is Tiago. My question is about the complexity of the games. We have complex narratives in HTML5. Is it more difficult to design a more complex games with more phases for the web? So I wanted to know how complex the game is for the web.
On the developer. I mean, I prefer to build simple games. All the Enclave Games creations are basically games that took 2 or 3 or 4 weeks to create. And those are really simple and hyper-casual games which you can play. The gameplay span is like 30 seconds or something like that. And those are really simple games because the bigger the project you want to try, the bigger the possibility that you won't end it. So I know bigger teams working on more complex games, and you can have like 10 different developers or 10 different programmers in a team working on a single game, and there are examples of that kind of games for the web. So the good thing is the technology already allows that. So instead of like, can I create a Flappy Bird in HTML5? Kind of, but it will work slow, was the response a few years ago. Right now you can totally do that and it will take you like 1 day. So the more we can, we can create a lot more compared to a few years ago. So right now it's just a decision of the developers how big projects they want to try. And since we have good editors and other tools that help you develop the games, you can create more and bigger projects, even if you're working alone or if you're working with a bigger team. That's totally on the developers. For me, I wanted to experiment with the technology, wanted to create something simple. Most of the games are really simple, and we're using some specific things, like with the Hungry Fridge, I wanted to show the Gamepad API with different games. They were mentioning some other technologies. So it was about finishing the game quickly and then talking about it or giving it to the players. But I know other developers, other teams that work on bigger projects, and instead of putting them on Steam, they could try to monetize them natively to the web.
Alguém tem mais alguma pergunta?
Does anybody have any other questions? We have one final question about web monetization. How can we guarantee that somebody will run your script without paying you or anything? What about safety to avoid cracks?
General problem of the web that you can have your content stolen. So in the same way you can have your content stolen, replace the payment pointer, and being published somewhere far away that they don't accept DMCA, and then they won't take the stolen game from the App Store or from the market or from a portal. So I think that's just things we have to deal outside of the comfort zone of programmers, and that's the general problem we have with the web, not specifically with like web monetization API or with any type of other ways of monetizing stuff, because every possible way of monetizing content can be abused and things can be stolen one way or another. Source code could be stolen, or the idea could be stolen, so the game could be cloned, and you can still, like, someone will make your game, put it on a different store with the same name and everything, and will start earning money. It's still stolen, even though they haven't seen your source code. So I think that's just the general problem we have to deal with, not specifically to web monetization.
Legal, obrigado, Andrzej.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your lecture. Thank you for everything you've shared with us. Thank you for the news you shared on game development using the web platform. I think it is really interesting to stimulate this kind of development because the web remains as a wonderful web development platform. And now to wrap up the conference, I will turn over to my boss for his final considerations.
Thank you, Reynaldo. Thank you, Andres, for coming to Brazil. So what can I say? It's over, and it's over. Now it's happy hour time. So let's go to the pub. This is the best way to close a conference is when we get together, we drink together. I have to thank the whole technical team who made this event come true. I also like to thank the NIC.br event department on behalf of Belle and Adriana, but there are several other people who work at that department that made whatever they could, as well as the technical team, audio, film, and of course the whole Ceweb.br team. You are just amazing, and thanks to you this event went on. You are all here, speakers, participants, and this was a very timely moment to meet each other, to talk about the web and to preserve web with their basic and original principles. And not only we had some time here to reflect, to think over, as we are responsible for our web, for the web we have for the web we want, and we can go after that. Thank you so much. This